You're a Broadway singer. I have to ask you this. Can you please for us sing It's Time to Recast and Rise? The stage is yours.
The stage is mine. It's time to recast and rise.
Yes! It's perfect. Thank you so much. Welcome to Recast and Rise, the podcast for performers and creatives ready to explore what's next. You'll hear inspiring stories of artists who reinvented themselves and found new careers after the stage. Let's recast and rise. Maria, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. You were a Broadway singer, and now you are the #1 podcast host in the houseplant world. This is incredible. What a remarkable journey. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I always giggle at my intro because I'm like, is that my life? This is so crazy.
And before you share about all your life as a performer and the business that you have, we want to hear about it. By the way, the podcast is named Growing Joy with Maria, and we'll hear all about it, so stick around. But you wrote a book, so can you show us?
Growing Joy, the Plant Lover's Guide to Cultivating Happiness.
Beautiful. What can we expect to find in this book?
Yeah, so it's actually a self-help book about how to live a happier life by connecting with nature. And it has over 60 practices for connecting with nature, with houseplants, with your garden, with your trees on your block, all in service of helping you connect with yourself and connect with nature in this time of life where we're all so screen addicted. It's really helping you disconnect from your screens and reconnect with yourself.
I want to hear all about your career transition. But first, tell us more about you as a performer and what you did.
Yeah, so I spent my first decade of my professional career from, 20 years old to 31 years old as a musical theater performer. So I went to school for opera. I was born singing and I'm the first child. I'm an Aries. I love the spotlight. I always knew I wanted to be on Broadway when I grew up. I went and got my degree in opera. I came back to New York City and immediately started auditioning. And I was super fortunate that for the first decade of my life, I got to perform in all of the musicals that we know and love. Like my first 3 jobs out of school were West Side Story in different varieties, different shows. I did Cats on Broadway. I did the national tour of Sound of Music and Evita and Man of La Mancha. I got to do all the really good old school musical theater shows because I sing the high notes.
Very good. Incredible. Tell us a little bit about when you felt it was time for you to transition.
Yeah, ironically, it came to me when I was fulfilling my dream of being on Broadway. So, I waited 10 years to book a Broadway show, and it was a crazy time in my life. It was also when I moved in with my boyfriend. So I feel like it was a career milestone. It was a personal milestone. And I used to be an epic plant killer. So I had wanted to have houseplants before, but I would always bring them home and kill them almost immediately. I only used to have cut flowers, but when I moved in with my boyfriend, I wanted to nest. And to me, nesting meant putting plants in my home. So I kind of Googled my way into figuring out how to have a couple of plants thrive. And I like to say that I came for the aesthetic. I came because I wanted my home to look beautiful, but I stayed for the wellness because plants ended up being the most amazing wellness tool. I was an over-scheduled, anxious New York City. I was living in 500 square feet. I was running from one audition to the next, one side hustle to the next. I had this very overstimulating life. And plants really helped ground me back into myself and back to nature. And so when I was in Cats on Broadway at the time, I knew that my contract was ending because, as performers, you work on a contract for so long and then it's over and you're unemployed again. And I always get kind of depressed. So I thought, okay, well, I love podcasts. I was listening to podcasts all the time when I was commuting on the subway, but I couldn't find a podcast about houseplants. I kept searching for one and I could find episodes on gardening podcasts about houseplants, but there were no podcasts about houseplants. So I remember being backstage one day being like, would it be crazy if I made a podcast about houseplant care? Would that be crazy? And kind of workshopped the name with my cat's coworkers backstage in one of the dressing rooms. And then after my contract ended, I decided to figure out how to create and launch a podcast. So it's very interesting that this dream realized kind of opened the door for this new dream to manifest.
Fascinating. And I wanted to know if loving plants and your passion around plants started as a passion, or you knew that you wanted this to potentially be your next career.
No, 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 no. It was a total passion. It was total. It was literally, I literally just thought I was going to make my plants pretty. I was going to make my home pretty. It was like decor, you know? I was really just trying to make a cozy home for me and my husband. And also, we cook a lot. And we had this tiny balcony in our New York City apartment. It was like 7 square feet. And I was like, well, maybe I can grow some chives and basil. So we can cut the chives and put them in our scrambled eggs in the morning, and we could use the basil for pesto. It was truly just a nesting thing. And it was only after I had this emotional response to plants that I was like, every millennial living in a city needs to experience this. Every single person needs to have a plant thriving in their home, not for the aesthetics, but for the emotional regulation and grounding that it brings. And that's when, but even when I launched the podcast, I thought I was going to do 10 episodes of the podcast as a passion project and then book another Broadway show. Like, I didn't think this would be what I did full time. Maybe it would be a side hustle that like brought in extra income when I was unemployed in between shows, but I never thought this would be my full-time job. It was really just following a passion. It was like this intuitive whisper that just kept being like, do a podcast, start an Instagram account, do this, do plants. Like, it was really cool.
So, Maria, you mentioned that you were potentially thinking of doing 10 podcasts and then that's it. I'm going to go back into a show. And then next thing you know, you build a business. How did that happen? How,
I don't know.
what,
I don't know.
Yeah,
so great question. So I'm still piecing that together 8 years later. It was interesting. I really feel like the beginning of Growing Joy, by the way, we used to be called Bloom and Grow Radio because I named the podcast after Bloom and Grow Forever, Edelweiss from Sound of Music, the line from the song. I really do feel I'm a very spiritual person, and I felt like the universe really had my back at this time in my life. The doors were opening towards plants and they kept closing towards performing. So I thought I would book another Broadway show immediately after my first one. It took another year to book a show. So all of a sudden I had this year of unemployment where I was able to pour time into the podcast while I was auditioning and working my side jobs. I just had this like fixation on creating this. And the other thing is because I was the first podcast about houseplants and I used Instagram as a way to market it, I connected with so many plant people that were just like me that wanted a podcast about houseplants. So I was watching the auditions dwindling while the downloads were doubling every month. And so I had that kind of real life validation of, wow, maybe this is something, like maybe this is more than 10 episodes. Oh my God, I hit 1,000 downloads. Oh my God, I hit 10,000 downloads. Like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And that's when I started thinking long term. And I monetized very slowly. And it was literally, I launched very lean. I watched YouTube videos on YouTube about how to edit a podcast on GarageBand, how to launch a podcast, and then I borrowed a friend's microphone for the first 20 episodes. So I had no, investment. It cost $20 to host my website. I had a friend design my website for me, and it cost $20 to host my website for the month. So the first monetization of the show was, okay, well, how do I make $20 a month? Because I want to at least break even. I don't want to, spend my savings on this. And that's where becoming an Amazon affiliate started. So I think Amazon affiliates was my first monetization. And then the affiliates started working out. So I took a course on affiliate marketing, and then I started creating strategic affiliate partners with other plant companies like a grow light and a pot company, like all of the things that I was already using. And it really just ended up being, my website costs $20. How do I make $20 a month? Okay, this course costs $400. How do I make $400? So it was always first just to break even because I didn't think I was going to make money from this. I didn't pay myself for years from this because I thought it would just be this little nugget. And then as I kept growing the show, I hit a point where I thought, okay, I can't pay for this out of my pocket anymore. I can't just break even and spend 10 to 20 hours a week on this. And that's when I started getting sponsors, building out kind of a more robust financial system. I got invited to speak at a couple of events. And then I got my book deal in 2020, which was kind of the moment where I thought, wow, I think I could make a run for this full time. So it's been very incremental, very slow.
Very slow, but thank you for sharing all the steps. Very clear. Um, uh, Affiliate marketing to then obviously with Amazon, and then the podcast kept growing, and then the book. And what I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm wrong, obviously that's your story, but also just keep going.
I think if you really want to do something, you can figure it out. I had no idea how to start a podcast. And back in the day when I started a podcast 8 years ago, there wasn't every other influencer having a how to start a podcast course. Like I literally Googled my way, YouTube videoed my way into launching. I mean, I think John Lee Dumas had a free podcast on how to launch a podcast. And I listened to that podcast. I was scrappy and just figured it out. And I think that is entrepreneurship, particularly when we talk about making a career pivot, is just understanding that you're going to be in a perpetual state of figuring stuff out.
Quick pause. If you are a performer wondering what's next for me, let's connect. I would love to speak with you. You can also send me a message on my socials. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more inspiring stories and career tools. Now, back to our chat. Did you have any fear throughout that transition from being a performer to one day, okay, I'm taking the leap, that's it?
I think I never chose the leap. The leap was forced on me in the pandemic. I don't know if I would have ever been brave enough to fully turn my back to Broadway. I'm really thankful I did. I feel much more fulfilled in this chapter of my life. But this monetizing and going full time with the show was really a reaction to Broadway closing down and the pandemic happening. And I felt so lucky that a book deal landed in my lap and I had this monetizable asset that I could pivot to when all of my friends who are on Broadway, their side hustle was working in restaurants and restaurants were closed too. That was such a scary time for performers. And so I was kind of pushed. I was kind of shoved through the door of being full time. And yeah, it was scary. I think it's scarier now. I think being full time at it is much scarier than those first couple of years when I was part-time at it and it didn't pay my rent. It didn't pay me. It was money that was going into an account and it paid for my plants. It paid for, business stuff. But I think that was much less scary than now. If I don't get sponsors or if I don't get downloads, I don't pay my rent. That's a much scarier reality, I think. So it's kind of opposite. The fear has grown instead of, I was just very naive in the beginning, just being I just like plants and want to talk about plants. So I guess I got kind of lucky.
Yes, and I can, what I'm hearing is also the fear grew in something completely different where now, okay, you have a business you need to make this work versus before, okay, I can still rely on going
Low
back
stakes.
to the show. And yeah. What kind of people did you need to circle yourself around in order to succeed? And are there people that you're grateful that they were there for you during that time?
I love this question. I'm very thankful that I had parents and siblings and a husband that supported me. So selling was really hard for me in the beginning of my business, and my husband took over my sales. So he, became the quote unquote, head of sales for Bloom and Grow Radio. And he would take the sales calls for me because back then it was too hard for me to sell myself. And I would get on these calls with CEOs and I would hang up on these calls and just start crying because I couldn't quite get there yet in terms of selling my show and selling myself. So I think having people that really saw the vision and believed in me were important because the thing with entrepreneurship is it gets hard. It gets really hard. You get knocked down, you get hiccups, you have launches that don't go the way you planned, you have technical difficulties, you get taken advantage of. Like all of these things happen in entrepreneurship. So you need people that when you're knocked down can help pick you up and be like, no, remember who you are. Remember what you've built. Let me hold this mirror up and show you what you've built and remind you of these things when you're struggling. Um, Therapist was really important. I'm really thankful for my therapist also having like a non-bias space that I can kind of process my anxiety with around the business and also kind of fear set with. And then also mentors. So my dad gave me this really good piece of advice a couple of many years ago when I was in real estate, one of my many side hustles when I was a performer. I was a real estate agent and I was new to real estate. I had just gotten my real estate license and I was flailing. I hadn't made a deal yet. And he said, listen, you got to go find the three best agents at your agency and befriend them and figure out how they run their businesses and follow them and study them and then replicate it. This isn't making a new wheel. Like you got to just figure out the high performers and befriend them and figure out how you can add value to them and ideally learn from them. And I did just that. And I was very successful. I've kind of taken that approach now as I've grown this business, finding other podcasters in the space that are a couple steps ahead of me and being in a mastermind with them, paying to be in masterminds where people are farther advanced than me, taking courses. I wish I took courses earlier when I was starting out because I wasn't paying myself and because it was a hobby. I did have this like, I'm scrappy. I don't need to pay for things. Like, I'm just going to do it. I wish I paid coaches earlier. I think I could have saved myself some mistakes and just like a slower learning curve. I wish I kind of quickened my learning curve there. But yeah, I think having your hype people, the people that believe in you, the people that celebrate you. And I also think as important is setting boundaries around the people that don't believe in you, setting boundaries around the people that, I had a lot of people when I launched this thing being like, you're doing what? Aren't you an actress? Aren't you worried that starting this podcast about houseplants is going to make casting directors not think you're interested in working as an actress? Like, don't you think maybe you shouldn't tell your theater agent about your book deal because you don't want him to not submit you? So there are negative people who are scared because it's their own shit. And I realized that I had to kind of pick and choose who I discussed business with. So I think it's kind of on either side.
Yes, I love what you just said about your identity as a performer.
Mm-hmm.
You were a performer, now you're not, and how this also changed you. You are different women, and how, the industry was potentially looking at you like, oh, you're not a performer anymore. You're this or you're that. I'm assuming you probably had to go through that transformation phase where you were not a Broadway performer. You are now this amazing businesswoman, but that's big change.
Yeah, it was excruciating. I'm not going to lie. It's my entire identity was wrapped up with being on Broadway. I never thought I would get married. I never thought I would have kids. Like I only thought I would perform. And so all of a sudden I had this enormous ego death in the pandemic. And the thing is, it was excruciating, but I'm so thankful for it because life, if you allow it, life can really surprise and delight you in the most wonderful ways. For 30 years, I thought my life would look this way. I would be on Broadway for the rest of my life. I would live in New York City. I would probably be single. I always told myself I'd be the fun aunt. I'd be the fun aunt to my siblings' kids. I'd never have kids of my own. And my life looks so different. I live in South Florida now. I'm a podcaster. I'm not a singer. I eat dinner with my husband every night. I don't go to work, at 6:00. It's a very different lifestyle. And I'm I'm so much happier. I don't think I understood also how unhappy I was in that industry until I got out of it. It's a really tough industry to thrive in, but I was so attached to it that I needed to be there, right? Like I couldn't not be there. So allowing yourself to have these, not for lack of a better pun, but allowing yourself to really flow through these seasons is a really beautiful thing that not a lot of people allow themselves. You see people who just live in their lane and their one job and this is the way the world works and this is great. And that's great for them. I'm not saying everybody needs to be a psycho like I am and do like a 180 in the middle of their life, but it's available to you. It is more available, I think, than people understand.
Yes. And to go back to your husband had to do the sales call. You could have done that, I'm sure, but you were not there yet. Okay. And so you had to learn how to make those calls at some point.
I did.
That is a skill that you needed to develop to learn. What other skills? So besides sales, what other skills did you have to, now looking back, you're like, I needed to be a marketer. I needed to be sales. I needed to be HR for myself.
I needed to learn how to send a Google invite. Like I had no technological experience. I mean, when you're a performer, you have your call sheet at the theater. You write I didn't use a calendar. Like I wrote down my call times for the week, and the week always changed. And I was on tour with a mutual friend of ours in 2019. Like you just show up when they tell you to, right? I remember I got huge get in my first couple of interviews. One of the largest plant brands in the country decided to meet with me, and I sent them the Google invite in the wrong time zone because I couldn't figure out Google invites. Like Gmail, getting an email for my business, making a business card. I mean, I made a fake business card before I even started. I just like went on, one of those websites and just like made a fake business card. So I had something to pass around to pretend that this was a real thing. So there was a lot of tech skills. I had no digital marketing expertise. I'm still struggling like there. I'm still trying to find mentors and classes on SEO and how that works. What other skills did I need? Sales, selling myself. I think one of the biggest skills I needed was confidence. I think being a performer, it's easy to get down on yourself, and it's easy to really validate the opinion of the people on the other side of the table over yours. And all of a sudden, I'm the CEO of my company, and what I say goes, and I'm the visionary, and I'm the creator, and I'm the star. That was an interesting space to step into because I was so used to being the understudy. I was so used to being in the ensemble. I was so used to getting rejected. Um, so I feel like there was some like worthiness work that I had to do. And I don't know, my marketing, like my main digital marketing. I mean, I had to take the Instagram course. I had to read the book on Instagram. I had to do, all of that. There were a lot of gaps to fill in.
Is so successful. I look at all your podcasts, your socials. I'm getting your email campaigns. I mean, you are incredible. It's remarkable. I guess I want to go back to you being a real estate, right?
Yeah, realtor. Yeah.
You were a realtor. Why? Okay, so you were that while performing. Was being a plant guru, serial plant killer, you call yourself?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Always like something that you wanted to do compared to real estate? Like, why not real estate versus this project here?
I didn't know it was available to me because when I was doing real estate, I was a plant killer. So I didn't think about it, right? Like I just used to bring bouquets of flowers home because I knew that I couldn't keep plants alive. So I didn't know being a podcaster was available to me. I didn't have the passion for something. Real estate really just paid my bills. When you're living in New York City and you're auditioning and you're not in a show, you need an easy way to save a bunch of money, pay your bills in a way that's easy and doesn't take up, 80 hours of your time. And I had many different side jobs. I mean, I've worked at a juice cleanse place. I worked at a yoga studio. I worked at a pizzeria. I worked for Mario Batali for a while. I babysat for the rich and famous. And real estate, I did get a taste for entrepreneurship because you really are you're in charge of your own money. So that was my first kind of taste of that. But yeah, there was never a passion for real estate. There was a passion for the money that real estate brought in.
Hearing your story, it seems like you always had this tendency to want to build your own business. It sounds like, because real estate is a bit of that.
Yeah, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So it's not a very successful entrepreneur. So it's not as scary to me because my brother and my dad are both really successful entrepreneurs. So at any moment I could call them and ask them a question or I'll call them crying, sometimes call them crying because, I needed to be talked off the ledge of something. So yeah, I think itself, being a performer is very entrepreneurial because you're really the CEO of your own brand. You're marketing and pitching yourself in every audition. You're managing your own money. You're a contractor, right? So I think you have to be comfortable with a certain level of risk as a performer that entrepreneurs also need to be comfortable with. So I think from the beginning, I've always led a kind of non-traditional lifestyle. That's what my friends used to say, Maria and her non-traditional lifestyle, when I would go to work, when they would all come home from their normal jobs. So I think, yeah, there was always an itch in me. And it's funny, my husband, thank goodness, has a normal job that he goes to an office for, and I get his health insurance, which is amazing. But yeah, I mean, I've never had a 40-hour a week, go to the office, clock in, clock out job, which feels crazy. Very fortunate and crazy. And also, like, obviously also comes with as many negatives as it does positive, right? I think sometimes the grass can always be greener.
Maria, what would you say to someone that is a little bit scared and feels stuck into transitioning into another career, especially as a performer?
Yeah, for performers, my main thing is you have so much more value than you think you have. We have soft skills. We are naturally good at sales. We are natural born leaders. There are so many unquantifiable skills that performers have. We are team players in a way that no one else is, that really do translate. I feel you in also sometimes feeling like you're in a box and feeling like maybe you aren't worthy or that it is scary. But I think my number one thing I would love to say is you're so much more than your resume for your theater career. Like, you are so much more. It's wild. And I'm so excited for you to explore and develop the skill set in a different capacity. The other thing I would say is do it slowly if you can. If you have to do it quickly, do it quickly. But particularly if you're moving into a passion-based entrepreneurial business the way I did, I'm really thankful that I didn't have the bill paying pressure immediately. I was able to build this business for 4 years. I was able to build my audience. I was able to try stuff that didn't work. I was able to learn and buy courses for myself with money from cats that then taught me how to do these things, right? So I think sometimes where I see people with the most stress is they just like quit their job with no plan. I think, how can you just 1% by 1% by 1% add in something and take away something? Um, and yeah, I think, but I really do feel like performers have such a varied skill set. And now, in my mid-30s, a lot of us have transitioned out of performing. Not that many people hang in there this long. And it's been so fun to see where everybody goes. Like, all of my performing friends have equally interesting jobs. They're just doing something a little bit different now. And also they find performing again later in life in different ways. So I also think the door doesn't have to close, You can always leave the door open. I think a mistake that I made, which was really a trauma response, was, in the pandemic after my show that I was in got canceled, I didn't sing for like 3 years. I just, like, that part of my heart just turned off. Like, it went completely dormant. And I had to like disassociate. I noticed I stopped talking to my friends from the theater industry because I just like had to pretend I kind of wasn't to find my personality outside of theater. And I kind of wish I was gentler with myself in that way. And now I'm finding myself again as a singer, and how I might perform in a different capacity now because I miss it. And it was a huge part of my identity for such a long time. So I think just like allow yourself to be malleable, allow yourself to move through seasons, allow yourself to be surprised, because we plan and God laughs. I mean, that is just the truest sentence I've ever heard.
It's so true.
Yeah.
You give me chills. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. It's incredible. Maria, what is next for you?
What's next? I I'm like, I want to do a little less. Hopefully motherhood is next for me. So I'm in the process of evaluating what does being an entrepreneur and being a mother look like, and ideally having some runway to kind of build out my business in a more passive revenue generating way so that when I enter my motherhood era, I can provide balance because I work a lot right now. So trying to figure that out. So I think the next, for me, well, I would love a TV show. Having said that, I would love a TV show. I have a beautiful idea for a TV show that I would love to see realized. If anybody is listening, let me know. I have the treatment ready. I feel like I jumped from one identity as a performer into another identity as a plant lady. And I'm curious to what the identity is of Maria as the full pie, the performer, the wife, the mother, the friend, the entrepreneur, like all of it, and having a little bit more balance in my life.
I really hope that this will happen for you.
Thank you.
I really do. Is there anything else that you would like to add, to someone that would like to transition or is just inspired by your path?
I think 2 plant-based metaphors that I'd love to share. Number 1, when you prune a plant, so when you cut a plant back, it triggers the burst of a hormone called auxin up and down the stem that increases lateral growth. So with like a basil plant, you have to prune it back in order for the plant to grow bushier and more robust. I love this metaphor for life. When you prune, you have to take something away in order to grow really robustly the way you want. So as we're making this career transition, yes, you're pruning away, but you're allowing space for something else to come through. And in my book, which I would love for everyone to buy, it's called Growing Joy, The Plant Lover's Guide to Cultivating Happiness. There's a page that literally it's just this mantra: after pruning comes new growth, after pruning comes new growth, after pruning comes new growth. Because in the pandemic, when I lost my performing job and was transitioning into being a full-time plant lady, that after pruning comes new growth was an enormous mantra for me, that it was just like running in the back of my head every day.
Do you know this, that I do have a plant over here?
It's your pothos over there. It's gorgeous. It's very happy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was a little bit nervous having you on the podcast with this little plant, but I'm doing really well.
It looks beautiful. It looks very happy. Congratulations.
Thank you. So based on what you do, should I name it?
100%.
I think we have. Yeah. Tell me more about it.
I think, well, there's 2 different things you could do. You could name it a different name that makes you giggle when you name it, so when you say whatever, like it's going to make you giggle and bring you joy. Or my favorite practice is naming a plant after yourself. So you name it Eve and you say things like, Eve, you're growing so beautifully. You're doing so well. I love you so much, Eve. And it's like you're giving yourself affirmations.
And don't we need that? All of us. We all
need that.
Can you tell us where we can find you?
Yeah. So I'm Growing Joy with Maria. .com across all socials. Come hang out with me on Instagram and TikTok. But since you're listening to this podcast, once you're done, you should head over to my podcast, which is Growing Joy with Plants. We have 300 episodes on every aspect of plant care you could ever want. But more importantly, for your audience, what I think you guys might like is we have a lot of nature-based wellness episodes with, metaphors like the one I just shared, restorative practices with nature. So as you're going through this transition, let me support you and your nervous system with some nature-based practices that will help you keep growing.
Thank you, Maria. We'll be sure to check this out. That's amazing. Thank you for listening. If today's story made a difference, share it with a fellow artist and creative friend. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and follow me on my socials for tips and tricks to navigate your career change. Until next time, I will see you in the next episode.